We are live.
Look at that.
Oh, thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm here with a really good friend of mine, Tony Johnson, who's a huge fan of both science and futurism. And it's funny, we talked about our subject tonight actually before this movie came out, but the movie made it strangely topical. With the Eternals out, something we were talking about is the idea of living forever or being immortal, or also the technology involved, or what the science was, what the morality is around it. I think both of us share interesting viewpoints on it. But one thing that we definitely agree on is the science is at the cusp. Tony, thank you for being here and talking about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This kind of grew out of a game night conversation that we had, and you raised a really provocative point. When did you get interested in the science of not only just genetic designing for that, but just the general science of manipulation?
I've always been a nerd. So.
Yeah, me too. That's why we're here, right? Yeah.
Always been a fan of science and technology and all the what ifs and what could be's that come from the bleeding edge of science, that stuff that's going on. And yeah, I mean, there's stuff out there that it looks very compelling.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a chance, however remote,
Right.
that within, who knows, could be in 20, 30 years, we might have the ability to extend life using things like CRISPR, for instance,
Right.
where we can go in and edit DNA.
Yeah, CRISPR fascinates me. Yeah. I'm a big fan. I heard on, I think it was Radiolab, was the first time I ever heard a piece on CRISPR, and I was like, what? You can, what? And it really is, it is a sort of surgical strike. Hello, Read Pros. It is a surgical strike, really, on the genetic code, isn't it? How does it work?
Yeah, so basically, from what I understand, because I'm not a scientist, I'm just a layperson.
You play one on television, yes.
But from what I've read, it takes this function that bacteria has, that it's able to read DNA and store snippets of code, so it can identify when there is for instance, when a virus attacks and injects its DNA, it can actually look through the DNA and go, oh, hey, this is viral DNA. Let's get rid of that and snip it out. And it just cuts it out.
It's an editing function.
It's literally an editing device.
Yeah,
and we're
it'll be available on Adobe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe it came about from two different things. There was somebody that was working on like yogurt, and they were trying to find ways to edit the cultures and stuff, and there was something else about that. But anyway, they
Troy says CRISPR fascinates and terrifies him. So I think he's one of our people. I find it fascinating and terrifying too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, all science, can be used for horrible things.
True.
But there's also a good case to say that we probably won't kill ourselves with it. So
yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I would say more benefits certainly have come from science. One thing about life expectancy that we even talk about, life extension, is the benefit of science. And something I think you mentioned to me when we were talking on game night was there originally a believed or perceived wear out time for the body? Was there was like an age that beyond which they thought it couldn't live? Yeah.
I see what you're saying. No, there was some kind of article that had came out recently when we were talking then, where they were there's lots of different approaches and theories about how the body ages, and about the reason for it aging, whether it's program theory, damage or error theory. There's what was that called? Here, I've got it right here. free radical
The
theory.
free radical theory. Yeah.
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 So all of those have to do with the theory of aging and how it has come about. And
Yeah.
there was a article recently that sort of supported that our aging is something that has come about through a process of evolution. That it's an evolutionary thing, that
Right.
it's a device to help the iteration of the species,
Right.
by getting rid of old and putting in new,
Right.
so.
And that's another, that goes into various questions of, with the resources or with the science of it. I grapple with also who would have access to it, and what age would you want to be frozen at? Older people tend to have more money and resources. They also, gather it at the top and would probably have access to it. Although there is a younger group of people that are, the new billionaires and the new millionaires, that are able to get to the technology. But it really is also, for me, a question of the science being democratic enough to be available.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And that's the whole reason that they have tried to make CRISPR a something that is available for everybody to use, and it's not just held by one corporation.
Yeah.
Just for that reason, to keep it from
So
being
important.
something that's held by Coca-Cola.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've got a barrier to entry here. Yeah. That for me, is there anything that's competing currently with CRISPR, or is that pretty much the cutting edge? Is there anything?
I mean,
alternate
as far
science?
as editing DNA, not that I know of. I mean, there's a lot of different approaches that have been taken over the years of trying to find ways to edit the body's ability for reproduction of the cells and all that stuff. But no, I don't think there's anything as amazing as CRISPR. I mean, that's it. There's nothing that we have that's able to do what that is able to do.
Yeah, that's what really caught my eye. You're right. Is that seems to be also the least invasive. Like, it terrifies me a little bit, as a guy who loves science fiction or writing, is like the idea of organ harvesting or replacement, or being able to keep going. Somebody that was rich, literally cloning themselves and then replacing their heart, lung function, opens up all those questions.
Well, think about that. I mean, we've only had our level of medical technology for the past 100 years.
Yep.
I mean, this is all really, really amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Before that, it was there was not a
leeches.
lot of humors.
Humors
like,
and leeches. You have bad humor, sir. Let me help you. Yeah. Our understanding has exponentially, at least in my lifetime, exponentially increased. And we'll get to later in the conversation the sort of moral underpinnings, because I think part of the problem with science now is I think the science is far in advance of anything we've come up with societally or with a morality affixed to said science, that we can't, it's like Jurassic Park. Just because we can do something, we have to make sure we should do it, or that we've thought it through. Do you agree?
Right. Well, I see what you're saying, but I don't know if I agree, because I think it's too simplistic, too reductive. Because I mean, there's always going to be consequences, but especially for something like this, it's something that we've always had,
Right.
and so I can understand from the point that it's such a revelation, if and when they're able to do this.
Right.
It's such a revelation to our life on this planet, and on other planets in the universe. It would be a ginormous boon to us to be able to suddenly change our very mortality, the way we evolve.
Right.
We'd be able to change that too. The whole designer babies kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which, people freaked out about way back in the day. And of course, that's
gone by the wayside now that you're like, oh, really? You cannot have that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do that routinely now, and it's not become a dystopian nightmare of a society. So
I think you're right. Maybe I am being reductive. I guess also I wasn't being super clear. I mean, what I was thinking was even societal systems, like we have a retirement-based system.
Oh yeah. No, all of that will have
all
to
of that
change.
has to go.
Oh yeah.
No one's going to be interested in life insurance if you no longer die at a predictable age. That's a pretty bad business to be in, for the next 20,000 years. Go ahead.
That brings up all sorts of interesting ideas. Like, what do you do? Like, do you have a life insurance policy for a loss of income for all eternity?
I know. Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's like, okay, so if you don't work with the expanding universe turning you into molecules and you're still conscious, do you still get insurance?
Yeah.
I guess that's my whole point. Yeah.
If you died in a car accident and then we couldn't bring him back, he's been destroyed. So
that's right.
We have to pay you so much money a month for the rest of eternity because
that's right.
He had that policy.
You're right. I mean, it's the perfect science fiction premise because accidental death. There would still be accidental deaths, but
disease.
There wouldn't necessarily be assisted living centers. I mean, we wouldn't have the Senior Olympics, the things like that. So I feel like, wait, I'd miss my senior discount. I mean, is there an ideal? The question is, though, at what age too do you get frozen? Because it's something that I saw. I haven't seen Eternals, I will admit, but Gattaca is a great reference, by the way, Troy. Yes, that addressed the idea of perfection. The Eternals posits an idea of someone being frozen as a child or a younger person with all the knowledge of an adult. And I understand they don't really develop the idea as well as they could, but what a great thought, puzzle to think about. If what if you got frozen at a particular age that didn't have the gift of wisdom, or you didn't have the fully developed thing? I mean, do you feel like there's a sweet spot that we would do that?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I think we have a natural place where our body gets to before it starts to then break down. So I think you'd probably be stuck,
like in your 30s,
late 20s, early 30s would probably be where your body would be a natural point that it would stay at, because everything else is you're programmed to get to that spot.
Right.
So I mean, your face doesn't stop developing until you're in your 20s.
That's true. Yeah, you get the sort of more
the literal bone structure of your face. It doesn't stop growing until you're in your 20s.
I heard that your eyes are the only thing that doesn't really age. Like they've taken photos of people from childhood to, just before death, the size and basic aging quality, other than, cataracts, things that can happen to a disease-wise. The eye is something that is really impervious to an aging effect as far as size or the cells. There's something about the eye that kind of remains a constant unless it's affected by disease. Which I find fascinating. It's like, what is it about it? Because if you look at an old person, I've seen pictures where they superimpose that person as a child. The eyes are the same size. They have the same sort of shape and color. They didn't sag and do all the things that other parts of you do, and I thought, well, that's fascinating. Is there something about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I do know they do change shape, and they are plastic in that sense that you can actually correct them. With lenses and stuff, and then not have to wear glasses. Because the shape of the eye actually changes. I mean, that's actually what happens when you get into your 40s. There's a rigidity where you lose the ability, and you start having to have like bifocals and stuff.
That's right.
That. If I remember correctly, that's how that.
Yeah, I think isn't LASIK reshaping the eye? It's like puffs of air that basically reshape the eye and get it back to being optically where you were at 20/20 vision.
I think they literally concept of it. Burn away parts of the lens to reshape it. Yeah.
Let's see. Script Doctor says, I wonder if that makes veteran journalist Rex Murphy the exception to the rule. I don't know. He's still around? Yeah. Well, I think I love the technology. I'm fascinated by the mechanics of the human body and why we age, and I do think it's the headiest concept, of course, is, you know, immortality, if in fact we're seeking immortality. And I don't even know if that's what you're talking about. Are you talking about hundreds of years, or are you saying eventually epochs, like someone could exist forever?
Well, you know, just the basics of you know, the pinnacle of using the technology, yeah, you could live forever.
Forever.
And in the state that you want to be in. I mean, there's all sorts of editing we could do to the body.
Right.
So you know, there's not even a limit necessarily with that. You know,
Interesting. Yeah.
on the very fringe of it, like if it can do everything we think it can do, and it does pan out, then yeah, you could totally make it so, like, somebody who feels like they are stuck, you know, in the wrong body, you might be able to change that. You know, you want
literally change out your body. Yeah.
Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff we could do.
Yeah, I that's the thing. It's like I mean, I'm of two minds. Like we talked about this. It's like I embrace the technology and how to do it, but I keep going back to that big question you and I were always having, which is, I mean, ultimately, does death give life purpose? And I came down on the side of the fact that it ends puts an urgency to it, I guess. Or for me, the meaning of life is contained within its finite quality. And I know you have a different spin on it. I want to hear your take on it, because I think that's the age-old argument of, like, well, the mystery of death and the finality of death gives my life meaning because I will do what I can within that time, and I know that it's going to end. But you had a really interesting argument to counter that.
Well, my only argument is that I think there are lots of different ways that people define their lives, and the way people bring meaning to their life. And it's like, for instance, there are some people who believe in living in the moment, which means you don't focus on the past or the present, you just focus on the now. And so to be rooted in the meaning of that moment having to do with your death and the beginning of your life is ignoring the fact that you're trying to live in the moment. Every moment is precious because every moment is different. And so
I like that. Yeah.
You don't have to have an end to make that moment significant. Just sitting there and realizing that you exist in this ginormous universe, you know, and
it's heady.
The probability of your existence, you know, of you being you is
that's a great, I without totally buying that, I completely see your point in that if you live in the now, then that is a kind of eternity anyway.
Well, sure. You know, the whole thing of let's see, there's intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations, and that whole thing. People,
can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, it's just that philosophy kind of stance of, you know, what is motivating you? Is it something inside or is it outside? Are you motivated for praise or accomplishment? Right. Or are you motivated just to do it? You know, that's your motivation, is just do it. You're a Nike ad, you know?
Right. Right. You're Nike. Yeah. There are very, you know, it's like that, the cliche of the people's love languages. There's a way that people express, you know, through acts or deeds, and other people need praise. And you're absolutely right. It's like, what's the animating thing in your life will probably determine your perspective on being an eternal or being immortal. I guess. Go
for
ahead.
For the majority of the population, they actually did a study once on mortality salience, where they found that most people just don't even think about their mortality. That's just not something they actively think about. It's something you may think about it from time to time, but it's something you do not actively seek out. You're not actively going, you know, let's see, how does my day today pan out in the rest of my life, kind of until I die, you know?
Am I clearly not die? Me then? They're not me, because that's me. Yeah, I wake up screaming in the morning. Yeah,
sure. And so, like, we're all different, and we all have different different outlooks and how we define our lives and give our lives meaning.
Yeah, no,
And I
you make a
think,
very good point.
well, and I think also the possibility of living forever brings about another idea and something else to think about, which is we are constantly growing and evolving. Some of us less so.
Hey,
Me.
why are you looking at me? Yeah.
But
Tony. Yeah.
you know, the you of this year is completely different from the you of 20 years ago. You know, thinking of it that way. You know, we're constantly changing as people. Like I know I was a complete moron 20 years ago, and I had stupid ideas, and now they're slightly
Now
better.
you're only half right. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
You're not fully witted. You're half witted. Yeah.
That's right.
Troy says I resemble that remark. Yeah, that's exactly true.
I'm on my way.
You're right. I mean, you not jokingly, you're one of the most interesting friends that I have because you often see things very different than sort of the common view. But you have very intelligent reason. You're very accepting of other points of view, but you have a very good sense of that. Like you've made one of the most compelling arguments because I always come at you with like, well, the things we value in life must end. So you value them more because you know they're going to end. Or if you lived forever, there wouldn't be a possibility of losing much. And for me, the idea of never having a sort of love of your life or a sense of a first and last is disorienting for me. Now I'm open to the argument for it, but I think that's what I was clinging on to with my own worldview, is that when you speak of things, it's like, well, this was the love of my life. Well, yeah, that continues on. That never ends. There wasn't a beginning or an end of it. But also,
or maybe there is.
Well, with the heat death of the universe, I think, yeah, we would.
No,
probably
well, I mean, I just mean that maybe, maybe you feel like this person is the love of your life, but maybe it's just a part of your life, and that at some point you go in different directions. You never know. I mean,
true.
That happens all the time with marriage and divorce, and people grow apart and become different or want different things, and it pulls them apart. So you know, there's lots of that's the other interesting thing about living forever. You could end up having so many different lives.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
You could go on to, you know, there are people who do that now who are like, oh, I was this for 20 years, and then I decided one day I want to be an actor, or I want to go and be a scientist. And they end up being, you know, there was some guy recently who was like 80 years old and he got his PhD in some scientific field, you know, and because that was one of his goals he wanted to do. So just imagine with an infinite life, you could pursue infinite interests.
Yeah. It's always that annoying question. I saw somebody on Facebook ask it. They were like, can I become a filmmaker at my age? I'm 60 years old. And I always thought, well, age is not the thing that we're talking about. You know, how motivated are you? Do you have something to say? You know, no one goes, hey, I really like Beethoven's symphony. How old was he? Can I enjoy that? You know, or was he a zygote?
Can I do that?
Yeah. How young was he? Because I want to make sure it's relevant. He's got to be young. So yes, you're right. You could live many lifetimes. And I guess me being probably the more pessimistic of us as far as this friendship goes is like, for me, my argument that I wanted to make was, for me, immortality would be also filled with grief, and there would be kind of a weariness because those loved ones would die, and you would get new ones, and they would die, and new ones and die. And to me, immortality is a process of compounding grief, and that is dangerous for me as a person, because I think that compounded grief, I don't know how I would process it as a human, because I would still be human even if I was immortal.
Well, you know, at that point, just talk with somebody who lost a loved one over 40 years ago and how they deal with that day to day and how it's changed them as a person. I wouldn't say that necessarily everybody is stuck in a spiral of grief who have experienced loss in their life.
I guess I
I-
was compound. I was saying it's compounded. Like you have this
sure,
wonderful
I see
life,
what you're
then it
saying.
ends, and then it compounds with the grief of the next one that was exactly what you wanted. Then the next one was almost as good, and then you lose it.
Yeah.
And I would love to write a science fiction story about that, or how someone would process it, because you're right that it's exciting. The thing is, your argument is so compelling because it is exciting to think about it. I have to agree with you. I would love to have more time to do everything I want. Like I already feel like I'm running out of time. You know, I love making movies. I love telling stories, but I want to travel. I want to experience all these different things. And I'm not going to get to all of them if we're realistic. You know, I've got 20 or 30 more years. That's about it. And so the hope of what you offer, we can't negate with the argument that I'm offering. And there is some truth into both of them. And for me, I love the appeal of the science of it, and I find CRISPR fascinating. I think if we can save lives or improve the functionality of people that
Yeah.
are born that way, you know, or have some crippling disease, I am all for CRISPR. I have no sort of fundamental problem with it. But when we talk about immortality, it opens up such a big thing. I was like trying to think of reasonably intelligent things, you know, to say about it, because I was like, well, it could be lonely, you know, like plants and animals and humans could go extinct, you know, or you would have to be with your friend group or your group that was also immortal. I mean, would you go for that? Like if it was a class system where everyone had an equal opportunity so that you could be with like-minded people, so you don't end up, you know, in this sort of elite immortals who just watch everyone else die, which I think is part of what that movie was about. Is like,
Well, I think,
would you do it? You would go for immortality. I understand.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have faith in an afterlife, but it's faith. It's not proof.
Okay.
So
Yeah. No, that's yeah.
to me, you know, if we can, you know, science should be fully explored. You know, we shouldn't just wall things off because they're uncomfortable or they seem like
I agree.
antithetical to the way we live now. Because you know, we need to grow as people and as a society. And I think that's going to end up happening regardless. You know, even if small changes happen,
Yeah.
um, that's going to take us having to change the way we think about things. But I think that's going to come no matter what. So, like, one of the big arguments for all of this is like, well, what about the environment? What about we're not going to have enough food, or we're not going to have enough space, or we're not going to have enough
Yep.
resources?
Right. The argument I was
But
going to make. What? How do you rebuff that?
well, just that we are continually coming up with new ways of dealing with these things. Like, you know, if we end up having thorium reactors, you know, that would take us for many thousands of years. We have
Mm-hmm.
we have so much, you know, stuff here on the planet to fuel those kind of reactors that it would last for, I think it was, I forgot how many thousands of hundreds of thousands of years. It's like something crazy. Like, we have
Yeah.
so much that it's like those reactors would never run out. But
Right.
then, you know, that would be only a stopgap until we make solar panels even better than they are now. Which,
Right.
you know, technically, with the way they work now, we just need a good storage system.
Yeah.
With their inefficiency that they're at right now, they're still a good thing to use if we store the energy properly. Like, there's
Right.
all sorts of things that we're not using, like gravity batteries, you know,
What are
thermal
gravity
batteries.
batteries? What are those?
So gravity batteries is you take the energy coming in and you actually put it into a weight that goes into the ground, and you haul the weight up.
Uh
And
huh.
then when you want to use that energy, you just let the weight go down, and it spins your generator and generates your energy. And
Oh,
that's the
that's very
most
cool.
simplistic way of putting it. And I'm not
Right.
a scientist, or even
We should have that
an
banner up here. We are not
engineer,
scientists. Yeah.
not scientist, not an
Disclaimer.
engineer,
Yeah. We
yeah,
have a
not a
brief disclaimer.
physicist.
Yeah. We're
Uh,
just got two
but
guys with an opinion here. Yeah.
there's,
Yeah.
if you go and you look up this stuff, it's stuff that's possible, and there are groups that are actually investing in these. Like, there's
Yeah.
a Swedish group that's investing in this new way of storing energy in a thermal berm, so to speak, under the ground. Like,
Right.
they pump in the energy, and they heat up sand, and then
Oh,
the
wow.
sand holds the heat, and then you can
Right.
use it throughout the year.
Right.
So, you know, there's just lots of other things we could do, and it's just
You're right.
the only reason we're not doing it is because it's not been something we are stressed about doing. It's like, oh,
Right.
the broken system we use right now is fine. We can just keep doing that.
What I always call the messy transition, where somebody's making enough money to kind of put up any barricades to entry for new stuff. It's like, well, yeah, we got that, but oil, we're doing okay. Oil,
yeah, it still works.
Yeah, it still works. And so
Right.
those barriers happen, and that's that's a messy transition. You in hindsight, you look at it and you're like, wow, people were riding horses and now we have cars. But there was a time when people were like, cars? Are you crazy? I have horses. We still measure
perfectly
things.
fine.
Yeah, we measure things in horsepower. Even still, we talk about cars in terms of horsepower. That definitely was, the mode of transportation for so long that there was a huge barrier. Now it's unthinkable to not have it. But the messy transition. Yeah, since we may or may not be able to reverse aging, a person who's 20 who chooses to use CRISPR or become immortal will be some version of a 20-year-old. But then if this doesn't happen till, like you were saying, like, you and I are 90, we'll continue to look like a version of a 90-year-old. Is that correct?
Well,
or there would be
no, because we would repair that damage.
Okay. So we would have a visual characteristic that we wouldn't associate with aging. It would just disappear. There wouldn't be the anomalies that people have when they get older, like age spots, and that we would reverse.
Yeah, you might have to have some plastic surgery to get some things back to the way they used to be.
Right.
Like I'm not crystal clear on the science, but your cartilage keeps growing, so your nose and your ears and things like that.
Believe me, I know. Yeah, my ears are still growing. Yeah,
we might have to figure out a way to print those things and to replace them.
That's true.
I can tell how old that guy is. Look how big his nose is.
Yeah. So I mean, and technically, then, if we could do this kind of replacement and science advanced, we literally could live until the sun went nova, until the Earth orbit was at its surface. Correct? I mean, we in theory could go that far. You think?
It seems like at least thousands of years is very possible, if not more. It's very possible. I mean,
it's fascinating because it's like, if you think about it, it could get boring too. I mean, there are epochs that are one is no longer than the other now for you. If you were billions of years old. I mean, I'm talking science fiction here, but the concept is heady to think about. Because my argument was it is bittersweet, and because it ends, that's what gives life its purpose, in my opinion. And I'm open to changing that, but I feel like I could keep going back to that, because without loss, without knowing the finite quality of it, it's hard for me to wrap around a life well lived, because the lived part, the object of life, is found within its existence, but also its end, if that makes sense.
Sure, because that's your paradigm. That's how that's the way your sense of self and your universe works. And so for you to have to shift that is really hard to do. I mean, that's
right. I think fear of death inspired me to find a purpose to my life. Like gratitude is big in my life. Like, I'm trying to be more grateful. I feel like my purpose in life is, it is beyond just existing. It's finding meaning. We talked about this before, where it's like, when I see death as near, or to a dear one, it gives me pause to think, what is life? And it's an inspiration, I suppose. Like, it gives a meaning to me, because death's a reality I can't escape from.
Sure. I can understand that.
Yeah. And so everything has a frame, but if I'm looking for fame, or I'm looking for meaning or money, you can't escape the finality of death. And so for me, I would want to find, I love your more optimistic view, which is, if we could extend life and quality of life, and have it be fairly shared, so that we don't get a family dynasty, where one family, I could see that. That would be a great science fiction.
you're going to have
yeah.
that until the technology becomes cheaper, which it always does. You know,
Yeah.
it starts out, you know, it's only the rich people get it, and then it you know, but that has to do with capitalism and all sorts of other things in the free market.
Yeah.
But you know, even those systems might have to change in the future.
I think you're right.
When people are no longer, so like one of the things I always hear people say is when we talk about AI and soft robotics and the fact that we can end up having, you know, in the future you could end up having robots walking around doing all the menial jobs.
You're right.
The people always say, well, yeah, but there'll be another job, and it's like, no. Once AI is as smart as you or smarter than you, there's no new jobs for you.
Yeah.
That's it.
They start with mowing the lawn and they're going to replace you in every level. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're going to wonder why we're here and why we're necessary.
Yeah. Like horses have been phased out and they're just kept around because it's fun. It's
for fun.
Neat.
Yeah. I always made that argument. I said chickens would be extinct if we didn't eat them. You know, if you,
that's coming.
If you don't want the bald eagle to be endangered, make it edible. And I guarantee there'd be more bald eagles. Yeah.
So that's one of the arguments I have when people say we'll run out of resources, we'll run out of farmable land and all that stuff. We already have technologies that use 90% less water, 90% less space. The meat, we have the technology to make meat in a lab.
Right. I've heard that
right now.
You can grow meat in a lab. Yeah,
they're doing it right now.
Wow.
And it uses 90% less land, 90% less water. It's all exponentially better than what we have now. So people always think, well, we're going to be running out of farm. Well, in the future, if you can build a farm vertically, that changes ginormously.
Yeah, you're right.
Like the amount of space we have for farming. You know,
and if you had a life extension, you would have people doing long form research into those areas, and you would certainly.
We're going to go to other planets. You know.
What's your take on that? Are you an off planet, off world guy, or are you a fix it here guy?
Both. Why not both? At some point, we can leave if we want.
Stephen Hawking thinks we should leave. He thought we should leave. Yeah.
Well, you know, Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking are right. You know that if we stay here, there is even how negligible a chance. There's always a chance that we can end up wiping out from some disaster that we didn't foresee. And so to spread us out across the cosmos is the best idea, so that you know, we have a chance of not being wiped out. I mean, that's true.
You're right. There is a finite period that Earth will be habitable, even if we are the best stewards of it. I am real big on colonization and moving out, and there's no reason why we need an Earth-centric sort of view or where we are if we can, you know. I was excited when I was a kid about the idea of, I think Carl Sagan introduced terraforming Mars, or the idea of us colonizing something else, so that even mining resources from moons and asteroids, so that we're not crapping in our own backyard is exciting to me, you know. But that we could go to a gas giant and suck up, you know, what we need, certainly in elements. That's an exciting idea, and we would need to be longer lived to be able to make journeys like that too.
Especially if we don't figure out how the ability to warp space and time. You know, if the whole warp bubble actually, if we can make that happen, which I know they're working on that, they're trying to figure that out. They're doing experiments now to see if they can actually do that. If we are able to do that, then we can get around easily. Otherwise, you might have to make, you know, these spaceships that can self-sustain for you would have
generations arrive, you know. Again, that's a great science fiction premise of a generations arriving, you know, replicating, and by the people that arrive are so far removed from the people that launched.
Except in this situation, if you do crack the ability to live forever, then it's the same people
It's the
that
same.
arrive.
Yeah, so maybe it's concurrent. You know, the same
Yeah.
people. You don't even have like a hibernation problem. They just need to learn canasta. You know, so they can kill a lot of time. You know, going from one place to the next. A script doctor asked a question. Do you know anything about that? Is there anything?
I don't know anything about
That's
that, but I know that people have thought about that, and of course, once you get thousands of years in the future,
right.
there are different. I forgot all the stages there's a list of stages for technology and the advancement of a civilization, and there are, once you get to the ability of building a Dyson sphere and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, you watch Star Trek and they're talking about adding elements into the core of a sun to try and stabilize it. And
I loved ideas like that. That's why I love Star Trek. Yeah, and I feel like the quote that comes to mind is, it's if it's highly enough evolved, it's indistinguishable from magic.
From magic,
That great quote, and so Script brings up a great point. It's like if we become sun movers, sun builders, we become solar system shapers. That's such heady stuff. But if you were to talk to someone from the 1500s about what we're doing now, it would be just as mind-blowing. I read a thing where we absorb in one day all the lifetime worth of information, written information that your average person in the 1600s would absorb. They would encounter a magazine or a news article, or just, talking with people and conversing. We absorb all that in a day now, which is pretty heady. If you extrapolate that forward, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years, imagine what's possible.
Imagine if we get that tertiary layer of computing going on, like the Neuralink, or there's another one that's working on that too, except it goes up through the aorta. It goes up through your veins into your brain, it's almost like having a stint inside your veins and your arteries.
It was you or Tanya that sent me the article about someone? Was it they were given? Was it hearing for the first time, or was it vision for the first time? Someone just had an experiment done on them, and it worked. I don't know if there was a news article. Yeah,
there's a bunch of things like that. They did have the CRISPR technology. They were working on curing a specific form of I think it was either blindness or deafness that they were using CRISPR to actually cure.
That is amazing.
Which is fantastic. And of course, the Chinese are already working on curing cancer. I mean, they were already into human trials if I remember correctly, when they weren't supposed to, back in like 3 years ago or something.
Yeah, they were supposed to not be doing that, but of course
they were already trying it.
The research. And it was vision. Reed Pro says, and it was I thought a brain implant, not necessarily a CRISPR thing, but it was a brain implant that gave artificial vision to a woman, and I found that fascinating.
Oh, there are things like that. They're finding ways to skip the straight into the brain and transmit from a artificial source straight into the brain.
Is that the occipital lobe? That would be they're into the vision part of the brain. They can basically beam
vision part. Yeah,
that's amazing. And I wanted to just highlight something that Troy said that was really good, which is as soon as we colonize other planets, we become post-human. Residents of different planets will adapt and evolve into different species. That's a really heady idea as well.
Isn't that what they did in Dune? Like if you read the books, weren't some of the people evolving slightly?
It's a great argument. Yeah, because the environment would shape. A lower gravity environment, higher gravity environment would shape the skeletal structure. It would shape it. Yeah,
very possible. That's if we use real bodies. What if we? What if we find that we're able? We could move ourselves into artificial bodies. If we can have quantum teleportation as a communication device, and you could exist in multiple places.
Yes,
different bodies.
We could be an army of sex dolls. I just want to have my consciousness moved. Yeah. No, that's heady stuff. You're absolutely right. If we get the consciousness out, and the consciousness, do you think consciousness can be immortal and transplanted?
I don't think we know exactly how it works yet. So
Yeah.
I think I'm really excited to see what Neuralink and those companies get from monitoring the brain from the inside, to seeing
Right.
what kind of information they're able to suss out about the working of our brain and the working of consciousness. And because we still don't really know how
Yeah.
all of it works.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was funny when people are like, oh, when we create a sentient AI, I'm like, well, I don't think sentient AI is,
Yeah.
I mean, at this
Slow
point,
your roll there. Yeah.
we don't know
Yeah.
how consciousness works. So it'd be kind of like tripping over a needle in a haystack and, oh, we found
Yeah.
sentience. Look
We
at
found
this.
sentience right over here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be sentient. I'm
And
terrified of AI. Yeah.
I think Elon Musk's his whole point was not that they'd be sentient and kill us, is that we would give a non-sentient AI too much power, and they would end up doing something that we didn't want them to do, and they don't understand because
Right.
they don't have their program, so they've been given a strict set of logic gates to go through, and maybe we didn't think to give them a specific logic gate to go through that says don't kill us.
Yeah, please don't kill us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the law of robotics needs to be obeyed. Script Doctor
Yeah.
brought up something that's interesting. I don't know. I wanted to make sure you saw it, Tony. Canada cured cancer 16 years ago via reprogramming the measles virus to eat tumors. Human trials are still ongoing, but so far a very successful experiment. That is fascinating. Do you know it? Hello, Mr. Tickletrunk, by the way. Hello. Have you heard anything about
that? No.
I would love to know more about that script. That is fascinating. If there's anything you want to drop in the chat or send us a message, I'd love to read that. As a follow-up, you also put a point I was trying to make, which is if you change in the gravity of Mars for future generations being able to survive on Earth, a Mars heart could be too weak to pump continuously on Earth. Very good point, because you're in a low gravity situation, assuming we wouldn't create an artificial environment, there on Mars. And there might be something to that. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Tony. Is there a purist where you have to stay in the environment as it is, or we would change the gravity to make it Earth-like?
I mean, I think the dream is to find some kind of artificial gravity or something like that, but we don't even understand exactly how to even approach doing an artificial gravity. But I mean, that would be something you'd have to do. Otherwise, you'd have to add more mass to Mars. And I think if you took all of the all of the asteroids that are in our solar system, that I think that's still not enough to get enough mass onto Mars.
I would agree with you. I think it would have to be a building based, like you would basically be confined to the indoors, where you could maybe increase the gravity indoors, and I wouldn't know how that would work. But yes, if you had,
I think there's a cartoon, a Dragon Ball Z, where they show you how that works. Training in artificial gravity.
That's right, and I get all my science from cartoons, as you can clearly see from our conversation. That's right. My level. But
I'm pretty sure to live forever, you just go
You have to wish really, really hard.
Yeah, it's a lot of straining.
That's the stuff though that I'm fascinated by. A kind of immortality, which I think art is making you immortal. That your work can carry on. I was just saying, I put some work up that a friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago. He was a musician. Put up some songs. I had worked with him on some songs, and he had some great songs. Those songs carry on past his existence. That is a type of immortality, if you will. Books are a message from the past. They're kind of time traveling in a way. Now all this will be eliminated in the heat death of the world and all of that, so that by definition is still finite. It's still precious. Every grave will be vaporized by the sun. Every record, everything we've ever done will be eventually erased, either by cataclysm or time or whatever. So there is some preciousness. It still falls into my argument of it's finite. We can only talk about immortality being forever, trillions of years in the abstract, because the reality is even the universe won't last that long. Like my idea of hell would be to have my consciousness continue even as the universe expands, pulls apart, and I'm pulled into molecules and everything dies except me because I'm immortal. To me, I hate the idea of being mortal, but I'm terrified by being immortal, because it would involve oblivion, or nothingness, that I would be immortal. So I would be stuck in these subatomic particles in theory if I was immortal. So I don't think I could live unless I knew there was some sort of higher alternate reality that I could go in. And that's heady stuff, a parallel
Well,
universe or something, or maybe that's someone's concept of heaven, but it isn't mine.
Well, I was going to say that's interesting. People are always. I hear a lot of people when we talk about immortality and stuff like that are like,
Yep.
"Oh no, we shouldn't do that. That's a terrible idea." I'm like, yet most of our religions are based on immortality. Yeah,
Right.
it's
They're
not
seeking,
immortality here. It's
but it's
immortality in an afterlife, but it's the same thing. You're just
right.
talking semantics.
Right.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh well, I don't like immortality if it's here. It needs to
Right.
be somewhere else.
Right. And I would say, well, if you've lived life to the fullest and you had a meaningful life, why would you fear death? You lived a full life, and do you need an afterlife to reward you, or are you going to be good in the now? Do you need that
Well,
promise of an afterlife?
that's my argument for the needing of a finality to something, or the impermanence of something. I think the beauty is in its existence at all.
Right. And that is beautiful. And I do see that point. And I guess what I grapple with, and Eternals could have grappled with this even more, but if life is presented to us as eternal, and we don't have the problem with death, then how we have to find a way as humans to strive to embellish that time that we have, to have our experiences and observations and everything mean something. Otherwise, I can just see human nature. You get bored. You sort of resign from finding any meaning, because you will just continue on. That the happiness and sadness expressed or don't mean anything. Having a good life or a bad life is meaningless, because you will continue regardless. And we would have to evolve. I think you would agree with me. We have to evolve, that if you live, one day equal to all other days, and there's no difference, that you have to find a way to evolve as a person too, to find long-lived kind of meaning in your life, or living life to the fullest, not based on the number of years, but what your capacity is as a person, like
Sure.
how much good you could do it.
Well, an argument can be made that some of that is mental illness.
What do you mean?
That the person who has, who is devoid of anything, who just, who's bored and given up on everything. To me would be a type of mental illness at that point, because I think you could make the argument that there's all sorts of things you could live for, like the thing I've been saying this whole time. Like, some people believe in the living in the now is the most important thing. So
right.
From an outside perspective viewer of that person who lives in the now, they might seem like a very boring life, but to that person, they're like, no, now is everything, and this is wonderful. And so maybe the way they're living it seems boring to somebody else, but for them it's perfect.
Right.
But
that's a beautiful idea. I love your idea of that. Yeah.
But I always loved the idea of Star Trek, which was you should strive to better yourself and to better mankind, and and so I always thought that would be the best way to live your life.
I agree. Yeah. No, that there's something beautiful to that. And
right.
And yeah, and I guess if we could meet in the middle on this, and you raise great points. It's always, when I talk to you, I'm kind of get foggier in my my argument, but deadlines need to exist, but they'll be less onerous or significant. That today's urgency can become tomorrow's acceptability. It's like the working life, would be hundreds of years. We wouldn't necessarily have to get all of our work in that finite amount of time, but we also have to grapple with the loss of urgency to our life that death gives us. I think you would agree. We have to figure out a way to look at that loss of urgency a little bit. And then
I just don't think a lot of, I like I said before, I think that one study shows that a lot of people don't have that that's not even in their, like, you are separate from most people,
Right.
and that they don't even consider
Yeah.
death as a
Yeah.
motive.
Well, I'm the unexamined life is not worth living. So I think way too much, which is probably why I'm an artist. That's why I make films, is that I want to create a kind of eternity, because I'm very conscious of death. And conscious of the finite amount of time. And I wanted to leave a mark, like, even if it's a mark of just like, hey, he was kind of funny, he did some funny YouTube videos, or, he made some goofy, noir movie or something. To me, that's because men can't have babies and women can continue on with that sort of biology. I think the male act of creation is being creative in science, or being creative and leaving something behind in arts. Often that's our personal legacy, that we can have a little piece of us continue on past where we are. And the concept of immortality is so appealing that I'm just trying to grapple with, what I already am guilty of putting things off forever. So it's like, would I have finished that script? Would I have acted in that play if I knew I had forever to do it? And that's just me
Well,
with
Tom,
my,
I
yeah.
think you are projecting here.
Yeah, well, hey, we talk about ourselves, in
That's
all
right.
art, but I think we're flawed as humans. So immortality would carry with it immortal flaws. It would, you know, I think with longer lifespans, it is possible that there would be more resistance to change. You were talking about, innovation and things coming in, but I can see entrenched political system. I could see a family dynasty, what we were both saying, that could happen, as being a barrier to do some of the changes that I agree with you. We need to look at
Sure.
energy. We need to look at that greater political resistance. Why
But
would you
I think
change the status quo if I'm doing really well? For
I think if
say,
history,
yeah,
I think
yeah,
if history is any example, that would end up in really bloody, horrible things at some point.
I think you're right. And
And then
and
and
yeah,
imagine in a future where people live for hundreds or thousands of years, a war, and the cost of that war then,
yeah,
and how
yeah,
people would feel about that. So there, I mean, there is a little bit of an argument to be made about that people's idea of risk aversion would
hmm,
change. We definitely would feel differently about cars and about people driving them if
yep.
you were, if all this, and you'd feel differently about pollution.
That's
Like
right. If I was
if
a
you're like,
million years old, yeah, I
you're
would.
like, oh
Yeah.
crap, I got to live with this stuff. I can't just force it on other generations. Well,
That's a
that
terrific
changes things a
point.
little
Yeah,
bit,
because you have to live with it. You can't kick the can down to the next
yeah,
generation. Is your point?
because
You can't.
it's you. You're
Yeah,
kicking it to you.
yeah. And I guess what I get terrified is the idea of, like, 100 former presidents still alive, or all 100 of them came from just 4 different families. You kind of you can imagine a super entrenched dynasty of people. We have to figure out, well, how would that work? If the
Well,
same system got entrenched. You agree that could be a problem?
I would think it'd be the exact same problems we have now. But I mean, but if we
Well,
use
they
now
do.
as
They
an example,
die. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. If
yeah,
well,
yeah,
no, they
yeah.
die through bloody revolution.
Not well.
They
Some
die
through
by
old
being
age.
assassinated.
Yeah,
They die by being overthrown.
yeah.
If you look at all the dictators and stuff that have come and gone, most of our recent history shows that it's becoming less and less, and that it's always some kind of act of something that gets rid of
Right,
them. It's not, we don't just wait until they die. I mean,
right.
you've got, I mean,
So,
Castro, but then like
yeah, he's
the
been there
son came
forever.
along,
Yeah,
and just
exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know. Maybe my dynasty fear is unfounded, but I can see a very savvy,
I think
group
it's
of.
founded. I think
Yeah,
it's founded within a
yeah,
period of time.
yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
but
It's
I
like
think
10,000
eventually,
years of one family ruling, that
yeah,
never gets assassinated or something. But that's an interesting point. That, yeah, usually it's bloody revolution, and certainly the kind of immortality we're talking about, and certainly is still prone to accidents, is still prone to something happening to you biologically
yeah, and
to
that's
do
just
that.
not even
Yeah,
taking into
yeah,
account all the things that might change in the future because our own systems of economy and governance might change
yeah,
because of technology.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And there's probably going to be some kind of population control that's implemented, country to
well, you
country,
wouldn't have to. In most in a lot of the statistics, they show the healthier and wealthier society, the less children they have, and
Hmm.
the later in life that they have those children. So if you start talking about living hundreds of years, you're like, do I
I
want to
mean,
have a child? I'm gonna
yeah,
wait till I'm 1,000, then I'm gonna have a kid. I mean, just look at LA. You got all these people that are in their 50s having children
having
because they
children.
waited until they were in their 50s. So it's the same kind of thing. You'd
That's
have
right.
like everybody be going, I'm gonna wait a couple hundred years before I have a kid. Not only that, but with like
Stagger
CRISPR,
it.
you could literally turn off. You could go in, get a shot, and it would turn off your reproductive system. So you could
That's
just
right.
go, "Yep, I'm not even. I'm sterile for right now, and I'll get a shot later, and it'll make me not sterile anymore."
And of course, the evil
Um,
me goes, and you can do that to people against their will. You can
wow,
sterilize. Yeah,
we
yeah.
have done that to
I
people
know.
against their will.
I know.
So
It's horrible. But yeah, you raise a good point. It's I guess I'm looking at like, well, there's ways. I'm not saying everyone's going to be happy, but you can be happy and unhappy in exciting and important ways. With immortality, you can wait and have children hundreds of years from now, or we can deal with population control. I'm sure there would be controls that would be put in somehow, but I feel like it raises so many great questions, and I don't think they even address really the heady idea in the movie Eternals, but it does beg one of the greatest, I think, science fiction uh, premises is that if you were truly immortal, what would we do? And if you can radically extend your lifespan with real science or science that is science fiction but will come into our thing, then what progress could we make? And I agree with you. I mean, the progress we've made with human biology is amazing. I think continued breakthroughs are inevitable, don't you? I think
yeah,
we have to confront, as a society and through morals, we have to confront what's inevitable, which I think is science advances. Do you agree?
yep, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And I
this
think
has
all we
been,
can do is to be positive and look for a positive and hope. Focus on being positive about the future.
I
Hold
agree.
on to that Star Trek ideal in your
Yeah.
mind and try to push for that.
I
I mean,
love,
we're
that's why I love the original Star Trek. The original Star Trek was about optimism and aspirational, and it would incorporate something like that. They grappled with the idea of immortality, and
yeah,
and science fiction and stories like that do such a great job thinking about it. It would be fascinating if a movie for adults actually came out that was a science fiction that really dealt with this. Because I still cling to my the finality of death gives life's meaning, and for me knowing that it will end gives me a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency. But I see your point. I think your points are completely valid, and you made them well. That there is an excitement to the idea of a kind of immortality, depending on how much of a lifespan we're talking, until the universe itself winks out of existence, which even that is finite and bittersweet.
unless we figure out a way to change that.
Unless we figure out a way to change that, or jump to
Could
another
happen.
universe, it could happen. But I
Could
think
happen.
there's a quote. We were talking about positivity, and I just want to say this has been a great conversation. I mean, we started with a little conversation about life and death, and then I was like, hey, the Eternals is about immortality, and then this conversation came up, and I really enjoy talking about things like this, because you want to feed your brain heady ideas. And you said be positive, and it reminded me there was a quote which I will butcher, but I think it was like death should not concern us when we're alive. It can't harm you because you're alive, and when you're dead, it can't harm you because you're no longer alive. And I thought that's a very cool quote. and you shouldn't necessarily worry about death, like you say. People are not conscious of it all the time, but for me, it's still an animating motivator, and it is the meaning of bringing purpose into your life, even if you're just born to die. But I'm certainly open to the idea of us evolving, as you said, along with the technology, and getting out of that narrow box And I think I'm stating this to sort of what
Of
you're
our
saying is,
biology, yeah.
yeah, a narrow box of our biology, and that we should be open to looking at life in a new way. And I really appreciate you coming on. If I could get you to come back, I'd love to talk to you some more about it if you're open to it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I would love that. I would love that. I don't want to live in a Star Trek of Kurtzman. Yeah, I feel the same way. He's driving me bonkers too, Troy. I appreciate you coming on here. It was a great talk. Please subscribe.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have you back. We'll have another conversation, and maybe if people want to drop something in the chat or leave a comment on something you might want to hear us discuss, we might be like, oh, I have an opinion about that. But we would love to hear from you, and I hope you've enjoyed this talk. Tony, thank you for sharing your point of view. You get some applause here coming up from Mr. Tickletrunk, who has been so supportive of my films, just like Troy, just like Script. Script I actually just wrote a script with that's fantastic. We read through it, and he's up there in Canada. He's amazing. So thank you for being on here, and like and subscribe, leave some comments, and we'll talk some more. And hopefully this broadcast will be immortal, and it will be beamed out forever. As long as the YouTube servers hang out,
Yeah.
So it's a kind of limited, immortality.
The internet is forever.
Oh, that's great. It said, don't label these streams with Eternals. I thought it was going to be boring. Ouch. Wow. Nice. Hey, I don't know. I'll do.
I haven't seen it yet.
Hashtag gotcha. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of my friends have seen it. So thank you for being on here, Tony, and we'll see everybody soon. Take care, all. Bye-bye.